Psychotronics. Ooh, I could do with a cup of tea and biscuits, I tell you. Right, big up the YouTube massive, coming to you from Braintree in Essex. Okay, enough of that nonsense. Right, I have done a number of races with the Nike spikes and a number of races with the Adidas spikes. Got plenty of results to go through, so we're going to find out which spike came out on top. So, let's crack on.
Cracking.
So I have here my trusty blackboard, which I'm going to populate with the results. So the first competition I want to talk about was on the 16th of July, and this was at Cambridge, and it was the Southern Athletics League. And I was competing for my first claim club, Braintree. The first event I did was the 100 meters. I was using the Adidas spikes, and I got a time of 12.2 seconds. It was hand timed, so there's no wind speed measurements. So generally when you get hand timing, you don't get wind speed measurements. So yeah, shortly an hour after that, I had the 400 meters. Again, I was using the Adidas spikes, and I got a time of 55.7 seconds. That's a 2.1 second PB. I was absolutely gobsmacked by that, really. And I wasn't even wearing the Nike Zoom spikes, like I said, I was just wearing the Adidas spikes, really. So there's no wind speed measurements for the 400 meters either way, even if it was electronic timing, because the thought process is if you get a tailwind at the beginning, you'll get a headwind at the end, it'll cancel out. So yeah, the following day I had another competition. This was at Stratford in London, and it was an open meet. So it was going to be a hot and long day and a number of events to do. So I needed to be able to make sure that I had everything I needed to be able to perform on that day.
Spikes, running vest, water, protein bars, gel pack, electrolytes, Telegon.
So I decided that day to use the Nike spikes to do all my races. I was doing a 400 meters, 300 meters and 200 meter events that day. Usually when people do events, they'll do one or two, certainly not three, and certainly not doing a 400 and 300 and a 200. I'm a little bit crazy, but I tend to find that I usually wake up after a race or so. The first event I actually had that day was the 400 meters. I got a time of 56.41 seconds. That's 0.71 seconds slower than I'd ran with the Adidas the previous day. So the way I can explain this is probably because it was the first time I was using the Nike spikes in a race. I didn't know how to run on them really, because they're quite different in the way they actually feel in a race really. I pushed too hard because the previous day I didn't think I pushed hard enough in the beginning. And what happens is, if you push too hard in a 400, you end up tiring up quicker. And when you tire up quicker, lactic acid builds up in the body. So you're slowing down for a longer period of the race. You can see pictures of me there stressing and straining. And by the time I finish the race, I'm absolutely dead and exhausted and knackered really. So the 400 meters is such a difficult race to run really. So it's one that I'm learning to run. So a couple of hours after the 400 meters, I've now got the 300 meter event to do, which is just about enough time to recover. So the 300 meters is not really a common event. It's usually done by masters athletes, that's 35 and above, and younger athletes really. So there's only 2 heats that day. You usually get 15 to 20 heats in a competition. But yeah, I actually ended up running in the slower heat because of the time that I ran earlier this year. I got 41 point something or other, which I ran in the Essex Champs. So I've got some footage, so let's take a look at that. So I ended up running with the younger athletes in my heat. I should have really been in the first heat, but that's how it turns out due to the times that you submit. Either way, the 300 meters has a race strategy which is similar to the 400. You push hard to get to a race pace, which is a little bit quicker than the 400. And you try to stay relaxed and controlled for the first 200 meters. Now, because I learned from the 400 meter race, I knew how to run this race. So by the time you get to the finishing straight, you should be running controlled, not really slowing down too much if you hit the pace correctly. I felt great. I really wasn't slowing down that much, and I knew it would be a good time. So I got a time of 38.34 seconds. That's 3 seconds quicker than I ran earlier this year, a second quicker than the previous year, and 0.3 seconds quicker than my PB from a few years ago. I kind of knew I was in good shape and good form, and deep down I knew I had a PB in me, but I didn't realise I'd beat it by that much really. So as with the 400 meters, they don't take wind speed measurement for the 300 meters for the very same reason. So a couple of hours after, I've now got the final race of the day, which is the 200 meters. I'm feeling a little bit tired after doing a 400 and a 300. It's a hot and long day, but I decided to give it my best shot, and I got some footage, so let's take a look at that. So the 200 metres has a bit of a different race strategy to the 3 and the 400. You've got to push hard for the first 50 or 60 metres, and then you hold that pace on the bend. Now as you're coming out of the bend around about the 100-110 metre mark, you then accelerate again. If you accelerate too soon, you'll end up slowing down towards the end. I hit it just right because I'm picking up the pace, catching up the guy in first place, but he managed just to stay ahead of me. So I got a time of 24.04 seconds. That's a big PB by 0.4 seconds that I got from a few years ago. Earlier this year I'd run 24.7 seconds, so significantly quicker. Out of all the races of the day, that's the one that shocked me the most really, because I'd run 400 metres and 300 metres before. It was a hot and long day, and I didn't expect to get a time that quick really. I've never been able to get close to 24 seconds really. So yeah, at the end of the day I'm thinking these spikes are really special really. Oh, and I forgot to say, music to my ears, it was a legal wind speed of plus 1.3 meters per second. Overall the weekend was great. The previous day I got PB with the Adidas, and the 300 and 200 got PBs. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to see how well I can run with Adidas spikes and how well the rest of the season pans out. So a few days after that, and now I've got another competition at Bury St Edmunds, and I'm wearing my Chelmsford vest, competing as a masters athlete. I had just the 200 metre event to do, and I was wearing the Adidas spikes this time because I wanted to see how quick I can run in them. I got a time of 24.4 seconds. It was hand time, so there was no wind speed measurements that day. So another weekend of competitions, which started on the 13th of August at St Ives, and I'm competing for Braintree this time. And I had just had the 400 metre event to do, and this time I decided to use the Brooks spikes just to see how quick I can run in them. I got a time of 56.5 seconds. I've got some footage of that. Actually, I want to show you is in video me suffering really. Yeah, I was like this for a few minutes really. I'll say it was a really hot day. It was like 34 degrees Celsius. There was hardly any shade on the track, so that didn't really help at all. So I will say I didn't really push hard enough in that race. I wasn't quite in the zone. So usually with competitions like this, lots of things are happening and you can't quite focus all the time. But it was still a consistent and decent run really. So the following day I got another competition. It's back at Stratford again with another open meet. So I decided that day to do slightly different events. So I'm doing the 100 metres instead of the 300 metres. But what's good about these events is you do two 100 metre events. So the first 100 metres, they stick you in with people with similar time that you submitted. And after you've done the first 100 metres, they reseed you based upon the times that you got in the first race. So this gives me the opportunity to run with the Adidas spikes and the Nike spikes. So the first event of the day, I decided to use the Adidas spikes, and I got some footage of that. I don't think I had the best of reactions, and my start wasn't that great. The first half of the race I'm a little behind, but as I get into my stride, I start to pick up and catch up, and I actually end up in second place. And I got a time of 11.94 seconds. So I was fairly pleased with that because it was sub 12 seconds. Ran quicker than I'd ran the previous year. I think last year I ran 11.99 seconds. So looking really good this year. And it was a legal wind speed of plus 0.1 meters per second. A couple of hours after that, and now I've got the 400 meter event to do. Now, I decided to use Nike spikes this time because I feel that I didn't do them justice last time. And I now know how to run in them a little bit better. So I did that race and I got a time of 55.63 seconds, which is a PB. Brilliant. But it's not a massive PB by 0.07 seconds really. And bearing in mind when I ran with the Adidas spikes, it was hand timed. So it could have been less than 55.7 seconds. So there were similar times really. I will say when I was running that 400 meters, round about the 180 meter mark, I thought I was going too quick, so I eased up a bit, which I should have not done. So at that point I felt, okay, I can run a little bit quicker in the 400 meters. So whilst it was a PB, the back of my mind I'm going, nah, it should have run quicker than those spikes really. So the next race I had was the second 100 meters, and I decided to use the Nike spikes this time. And if I'm honest, I had a couple of hours after the 400 meters, but I wasn't feeling 100% sharp. So really, this is not probably the best way to do compare spikes at 100. If you had two 100 meters and not have a 400 meter in the middle, that would be a good test to do really. Either way, I thought I'd give it my best shot. So I've got some footage of that, so let's take a look at that. Yeah, that car was pretty annoying. I thought they'd actually delay the start. Either way, pretty much the same as the first race. I had to kind of pick up at the latter part of the race, gained on a few people, and then ended up in third place. Well, apart from that bang in the race from the exhaust that kind of threw me a little bit, reaction again I don't think was great, but I got a great time of 11.86 seconds. That's actually an electronic PB really. So I think my PB previously was 11.89. My electronic timing, my hand timing was 11.8. So yeah, an electronic PB, the spikes seem to do well. I will say though, the wind speed was plus 2 meters per second, so it was a legal wind speed, but just legal. And if you compare it with the Adidas spikes probably were quicker with the wind speed that I had on that really. So final race of the day, and this time I've decided to use the Adidas spikes because I really wanted to see how quick I can run in them. The time I got was 24.05 seconds. And at that point I'm like, no way did I run that quick with those spikes. And I'm thinking, hang on a second, this doesn't make sense really. How can I run that quick with those spikes? Previously, in previous years, I'd ran with those spikes really, and I never got that close really. So clearly the training that I've been doing this year has helped a lot really, the 400 meter training that I've done this year. So yeah, oh yeah, legal wind speed of plus 0.6 meters per second really. So virtually the same time I ran with the Nike spikes really. Shocked, gobsmacked, in awe. And at this point I'm thinking to myself, hang on a second, I'm running similar times with the Adidas spikes and the Nike spikes really. I'm thinking if I'd run with the Nike spikes on that 200 meters, maybe I could have got sub 24, but you'll never know really. So from this point on, I'm doing all my races with the Nike spikes to try and see if I can get quicker times. So another couple of weeks and I got another open meet, and this time it's at Dagenham and it's part of the BFit Outdoor series. This time I've got two events to do, the 150 meters, which is a strange event that not a lot of people do really. But I wanted to get a PB in this because a few years ago I ran 150 meters and I got a time of 18.5 seconds. It was the only one race that I did. So I got footage of that, so let's take a look at that. Big shout out to Donald, who's doing a great job at commentating that day. He's a great Masters athlete himself. So yeah, it's a really strange race to run, pushing hard for 150 meters. I was actually losing form towards the end, but I still was carrying a lot of speed. So I got a time of 17.7 seconds. That's a massive PB really, really happy by it. However, it wasn't a legal wind speed. It was plus 2.3 meters per second. But in my heart, I know it's a PB because it's significantly quicker than what I'd ran before. So yeah, really happy with that. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, let's see what we can do with the 400 meters. So yeah, I've got footage of that as well. So let's take a look at that. The race strategy for the 400 meters is to push hard to get up to race pace as quickly as possible. So that's 30 or 40 meters. I kind of do it in two stages where I push hard and have a smaller acceleration after that. By the time you're coming out of the bend and heading into the straight, you should be fully into race pace and should be running relaxed. And as I'm approaching the 180 meter mark, I'm telling myself, keep on going at that pace, have the confidence to do it. And when you reach the 200 meter mark, you're supposed to work a little bit harder to try and maintain that speed, as inevitably you're getting fatigued. Now, some athletes by the 250 meter mark will work even harder again to try and run the rest of the race, but they've got a different energy system to me. I'm more of a power oriented guy, so I can't really do that. I actually end up slowing down really badly towards the end. You can see there the guy catching me towards the end, but I just managed just to stay ahead of him. And I got a time of 54.77 seconds. wow, I kind of knew I could get a PB because the previous race I'd kind of slowed down at the 180 meter mark. So this time I thought to myself, have the confidence to carry on and you'll be able to finish the race with a PB. And sure enough, I did get the PB. I didn't expect to be that quick, if I'm honest. I was expecting, you know, low 55s. So really shocked, gobsmacked, all those phrases in one really. So a couple of days or so after that, I had another open meet, and this time it's at Chelmsford. I had the 100 meters and 200 meter events to do. So the first event of the day was 100 meters. I got a time of 11.99 seconds. The wind speed measurements weren't working that day, even though they had them. But what I will say was it was a tailwind, and it wasn't, I don't think, a legal wind speed. It seemed more than 2 meters per second. I wasn't feeling that sharp really. So another hour and a half after that, I got the 200 meter event to do. And this time I'm telling myself I need to do a little bit better. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I can actually get sub 24 seconds, just push harder for longer. You know, you've got the strength from the 400 meters. And yeah, I got a time of 24.66 seconds. Really, what this is a lesson in is you cannot run for a time. You have to run the race correctly. I pushed too hard on the 200 for too long, and I burnt out at the end. But yeah, the point is with the actual 200 meters as well, there's a race strategy to it. And if you don't actually follow that race strategy, you will fail. You can't always perform brilliantly every single competition. And one thing that is not often talked about is the central nervous system, really. You can exhaust your central nervous system by doing too much, really, and you won't be really firing on all cylinders. And I'm sure that's what happened to me on that day. I exhausted my central nervous system. I did 2 competitions a couple of days before, 150 and 400 meters. Did really well in them, but after that I was absolutely spent really. So the final competition of the year, and it's at Bedford, and it's the Eastern Masters Athletics League final. It's my favourite competition of the year because you're competing against your peers in the final. You've been competing against them all year in the league. So yeah, it's a fun competition to do. And I had 4 events to do, 200 meters, 400 meters, 100 meters and a relay. So the first event of the day was a 200 meters. I got a time of 25.05 seconds, which is not a great time really. All of us didn't run that well. It was a minus 1 meter per second wind speed. It was more than that, if I'm honest, because the way they calculate the wind speed is on the straight really. But on the bend as we're coming out, there was a big headwind really. So yeah, we all ran slow, came third, really happy with that really, considering who I was competing against. So a couple of hours after that, I now had the 400 meter events to do. So the guys that competed in the 200 meters were also in the 400 meters. So I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be a really tough competition because these guys are really quick. But I'm going to give it my best shot really. So I got a time of 55.07 seconds. That's a really good time, really good time. Also, I came first. So just an hour after the 400 meters, I've now got the 100 meters event to do. So that's not really enough time to recover. Most of the guys that were doing it were also did the 400 meters, so we were all in the same boat. So I wasn't too fussed about that. We're all joking and laughing about it really. We knew we weren't going to get good times, so really we're not expecting much. I got a time of 12.14 seconds. Bonus, I did win the race, so that's good really. It was a legal wind speed of minus 0.1 meters per second. So yeah, really that day times weren't amazing. The only one that was decent was the 400 meters. Really strange to say that I can run 400 meters really consistently really these days. So running it consistently this year has been one of the most shocking and surprising things for me really. So what can we conclude from this? I think I need a cup of tea before I carry on actually. Well, what can I say? Well, let me have a biscuit first. It's difficult to say really. I've ran similar times in the 100 and the 200. If you factor into the wind speed. Okay, I ran quicker with the 400 with the Nikes, but who knows if I could have ran similar times with Adidas. The spikes themselves, can help you run quicker, but they're not the most important factor really. Now, if I bring the spikes, let me just get the spikes here a second as a visual prop. So if you look at both spikes, the Adidas spikes are no slouch really. These are actually a high-end spike when they first came out. They're like the top-end spikes when they first came out. They retail, they're like 130 quid really. They've got a stiff plate in them and they're really light, they're 130 grams. Now, if you compare that with the Nike spikes, it's also got a stiff plate, maybe a little bit, well, actually is a bit stiffer really, and it's got the air bubble in it, but it's 185 grams really. So the Adidas spikes are like 55 grams lighter than the Nike spikes really. So the spikes themselves, you know, are not the most important factor. As long as you've got a decent pair of spikes, you should be fine really. What I will say the most important thing is to train consistently, to train smart. Having a good coach helps a lot. My coach, I've been training with the last 9 or 10 years really. He's been instrumental in my progress. And to compete a lot really. The competition itself is actually a training session. So the way I looked this season was, every race to me was just a training session. I wasn't too fussed about winning the race or doing whatever. I was thinking ahead really. I'll learn from every race, and you actually push yourself harder in the race than in a training session. So they're really important really. If you do too much, like what happened to me at Chelmsford really, I think my CNS really kind of went bust really. So you got to train smart and compete smart, not do too much. You got to find the right balance really. But yeah, as long as you're not wearing these things, you know, you'll be all right. So buy a decent pair of spikes. Doesn't need to be the absolute best. As long as it's a really good pair of spikes, you should be fine really. Right, I just want to add a point. Whilst the Nike spikes didn't conclusively beat the Adidas spikes, apart from the 400, where I ran a lot more races in the 400 with the Nikes, I still believe I can run quicker with the Nike spikes. They've got a different feel to them because of the air bubble, and I need to get used to knowing how to run in them really. So I still believe they were worth investing in, but they're not essential really. So yeah, I hope you found this video interesting and useful, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video, which I think I'll do on sprint terminologies. So until then, I shall see you soon. Biscuit.